What causes wild yeast contamination in beer brewing? Imagine opening a window and letting in tiny, invisible visitors that can change your carefully crafted beer into something unexpected. That's what wild yeast contamination is all about. Wild yeast can sneak into your brewing process from many sources and cause all sorts of surprises. It often happens when wild yeast from the environment, like the air or surfaces, gets into your beer. If your equipment isn't cleaned thoroughly, those tiny organisms can hide on surfaces, in cracks, or on utensils. Even a small residue can be enough for wild yeast to survive and cause trouble later. Raw ingredients like malted grains, fruits, or adjuncts can carry wild yeast strains if they aren't properly treated. Sometimes, wild yeast is naturally present on these ingredients, especially if they aren't pasteurized or sanitized. When you add these to your wort, you might unintentionally introduce wild yeast. Open fermentation vessels, used in traditional or farmhouse brewing, expose the wort directly to the air. This can be a source of wild yeast if the environment isn't controlled. While open fermentation is part of some beer styles, it can lead to unwanted contamination in others. Wild yeast strains fall into two main groups. One is Saccharomyces wild yeast, which is related to the brewing yeast but can cause excessive fermentation or off flavors. The other is non-Saccharomyces wild yeast, like Brettanomyces, which can produce funky aromas such as barnyard or sour notes. These strains can also cause haze, films on the beer surface, or fruity and bubble gum-like flavors. Contamination can lead to off flavors, haze, or spoilage, which is why cleanliness is so important. Brewers should sanitize all equipment, including fermenters, bottles, and utensils, thoroughly after each use. Proper sanitation prevents wild yeast from surviving and contaminating future batches. Using sealed fermenters and controlling the environment reduces the risk of airborne wild yeast entering the beer. Some brewers intentionally use wild yeast strains like Brettanomyces to create sour or funky styles. But in most cases, wild yeast is seen as a spoilage organism. It can ruin the flavor, aroma, and stability of your beer if not managed properly. So always keep your brewing area clean, sanitize everything, and be mindful of raw ingredients and open fermentation practices. That way, you can enjoy your beer without surprises from unwanted wild yeast strains.